Hi, everybody. Welcome to Criminal Justice 201 Policing. I'm Professor Jason Ostro. This is week 10, Response to Special Populations. Let's get started. For this lesson, we will describe police relations with special populations and then discuss police responses to persons in mental health crisis. First, policing special populations. What do I mean when I talk about policing special populations? Who are special populations? What are special populations? Well, you can think of special populations as groups of people who offered unique challenges to both police departments as well as police officers. They could be the physically challenged, the aging population, young people mentally ill, crime victims, and homeless. When we think about the physically challenged, there may be a variety of problems that individuals are having, such as visual impairment, hearing impairment, persons with disabilities, developmental disabilities, in a wheelchair, maybe missing limbs. And police officers have to interact with those individuals as they would any other person in our society. Maybe that person is a victim of a crime. Maybe that person is the individual who perpetrated a crime. And you have to think about how do you interact with those individuals who may have limits in certain areas. The aging population. Often the aging population suffer from some serious and chronic problems such as loneliness, dementia, physical disabilities, poverty. Perhaps the police are the only people that talk to certain aging individuals. Maybe an aging individual calls the police because they want somebody to talk to and visit them, and that person is the police. The youth, special considerations. Are they less dangerous than older people? When we think about youth, we say teenagers, but the problem with teenagers is who's most crime in the United States statistically committed by or reported by? Most statistical reports indicate that crime is committed by individuals who are in their late teens, right? 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 is not a teenager, but still it's a younger person. So, is there less danger involved? Well, one of the things I would say is that the youth tend to be more unpredictable than people who are a little bit older. So, sure, they can be very dangerous. How about crime victims? Who represents them in the criminal justice process? As you know, it's not the prosecutor. The prosecutor prosecutes a case on behalf of the state. They don't necessarily represent the victim or the victim's interests. They're interested in justice. They're interested in justice on behalf of the state, which may be different from the interests of a crime victim. How about homeless? Aren't there certain agencies that are responsible for homeless populations and their overall well-being? Is that something that the police should be dealing with? You hear a lot about this in the defunding movement. Perhaps police should not be interacting with homeless. Perhaps police should not be interacting with individuals in mental health crisis. Maybe even the youth. I don't know. I mean, those are arguments and debate that we as a society should be having and talk about what do we expect of our police? What do we want of our police? So when we think about responses to persons in mental health crisis, in particular, this can be a very volatile topic for a lot of reasons because of the way that it plays out. First, you have to get a grasp around the deinstitutionalization movement in the 1960s, where as a society, we moved people out of hospitals who were in mental health crisis and moved them into the streets, and not the street per se, but we moved them out of the hospitals and hopefully into some kind of home, treatment facility, places where they could be helped, assisted, maybe with family. They could be put on medication and given appropriate treatment. And so that's been a blessing in many ways because there's more options available to somebody who is in mental health crisis than just being locked up in a hospital forever. They can be with proper medication treatment. Maybe many of them can function perfectly well in society. So the mental hygiene law does allow, though, the police and the government to take an individual into custody. Not that they're arrested, but take them into custody when they present a danger to themselves or somebody else. So police have this sort of gatekeeper role between mental health and the criminal justice system to a certain extent. And they really weren't intended, that being the police, were not intended or designed to deal with individuals in mental health crisis or mental illness. Think of it this way. Somebody who becomes a psychiatrist or a psychologist or like a social worker, they spend years training for that one specific task. Police officers are spend a lot of time training to be police officers. One component of that may be to interact with individuals in mental health crisis. So I think there's an argument to be made that maybe Perhaps for the police responding to individuals in mental health crisis may be beyond their purview, their training, their ability. It's an argument that you do hear about from time to time, especially when a high-profile incident occurs involving the police and somebody who's in mental health crisis. All right, so these interactions can be, extremely dangerous and difficult for both the police as well as the individual, because you're dealing with unpredictability and you're dealing with behavior that can be erratic and sometimes violent. And it's really prevalent in American society and society in general. There are estimates that 1 in 10 Americans struggle with some kind of mental illness, whether it be schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, um, borderline personality disorder, hallucinations, or any other kind of problem that may affect the mind, right? So there are any number of things, depression. So, how do police, or when do they interact with individuals who are mentally ill? Street level encounters. Maybe there's somebody calls 911 because they observe an individual like running down the street naked, yelling and screaming or talking to themselves. Which, if you live in New York City, you do see that, and probably any big city in the world, you see that because again, deinstitutionalization, the movement of individuals out. Maybe they've decompensated because they're off their medication. Maybe they have nobody to care for them. So you do see that, and police are the line defenders against issues related to quality of life, preserving life and property, preserving the peace. So they respond first. Mental health facilities. Sometimes an individual may be at a mental health facility and there's some kind of issue there, or that they need emergency attention. The police have to respond along with an ambulance. And of course, private residencies, such as homes. People have to respond to people's homes and apartments when individuals are in mental health crisis. And those could be, again, tumultuous and dangerous situations because you're walking into something, or the police are walking into something that is, incredibly unpredictable and can be erratic and dangerous. All right, so individuals who are engaged in mental health crisis, sometimes that behavior could be, bizarre or erratic behavior, drunkenness, intoxication, aggression, destruction of property, attempts at suicide. We focus on these, and especially in policing, we focus on like these kind of sort of, I guess, what you would call dangerous and aggressive behaviors. But most individuals who are in mental health crisis aren't necessarily a danger, right? Maybe they're depressed. They're not looking to hurt anybody. They're just having some kind of break from reality or mental health crisis. But sometimes that does happen too. When you have these, especially when you add like drugs and alcohol to the mix, you have these witches brew of things that could occur. All right, so how do the police deal with the mentally ill? Well, it depends on the severity of what the individual did. If they're just a danger to themselves or somebody else because they're screaming and saying that they want to hurt themselves, well, that person would be taken into custody and transported to a hospital, right? So you don't really worry about any kind of minor crime that they may have committed, in the course of doing this. Um, then there's crimes for survival, right? Or what about serious crimes? What if somebody is, having a bipolar episode and commits a very violent crime during that bipolar episode? That might need to be handled much differently than somebody who is just having a mental break and is running through the streets screaming, acting disorderly. All right, so a lot of discretion has to be used, and this is another reason why discretion is so important, and the appropriate use of discretion by police officers is so important. Do you transport them to the hospital? Do you have to make an arrest? Do you resolve without any enforcement action at all? Right? So those are things that you have to consider as police officers. And your first priority is to preserve human life. And the situation you may find yourself in when you're dealing with somebody in mental health crisis hopefully allows you to do that, right? So current options, you can, when you think about how do police departments respond to individuals in mental health crisis, this has really changed a lot over the last 10 to 15 years, and much more for the better than in the past. So current options could be exclusive police-based responses to individuals in mental health crisis, which are not as popular as they were. Police and mental health professionals, which is something that you're seeing, like this, crisis intervention teams and training, where you have police respond or specialized police respond, or maybe they'll respond along with mental health professionals together to deal with that individual. And then there's exclusive mental health responses, and One of the things, arguments that's made in defunding the police is that the police are too involved in many aspects of our lives, and one of them is this. And I could see why people would make that argument that maybe police shouldn't be, or police as we have thought of them and conceived of them, and how they actually exist in our society currently, maybe in that form, they should not be responding to individuals' mental health crisis. So it's something that's certainly worthy of discussion and consideration. Okay, this is a really important lesson, and there's a lot of material here. I didn't spend too much time in this lecture because there's quite a bit of material, readings, and videos that I want you to go over. It's really important. So first things first, read Discretion in the Mentally Ill. That's an article. There's another article there called Crisis Intervention Team Response. They're not too long, and they're very informative. There are two videos. The first one is Meet the Police Officers Trained to Respond to Mental Illness Calls. And I want to caution you that's highly volatile and disturbing. But it's overall, in the long term, it's actually very uplifting and inspiring. But there's violence in there, no question about it, a lot of it. So, but this is policing, and policing has to deal with, unfortunately, violence. It's government sanctioned violence sometimes. And then there's also another YouTube video, How Memphis Has Changed the Way Police Respond to Mental Health Crisis. Those two videos really should open your eyes to a lot of the great work that many police officers and police departments are doing in this area throughout the United States. And ultimately, as disturbing as some of these videos are, ultimately I think they're very quite inspiring. All right, so when you see dedicated work for some of these people. All right, anyway, you also have a discussion board assignment that needs to be completed before Thursday, and responses due before Sunday. I wish you all the very best of luck. I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you online.